Hi guys, welcome to day 3 of remote learning. And today we're going to be taking a look at affirmative action cases. We'll get into a little bit of an explanation of what that is, and I'm going to split this up into a couple videos to make it so that you can stop and start where needed. And our overall question that's going to guide us today is this. What advice would you give a school that wants to implement an affirmative action program? So we're going to hear I'm going to explain what affirmative action is. I'm going to talk about a couple of different cases that have gone to the court on affirmative action programs. And then after I do that, I'm going to ask you guys to kind of come up with a paragraph that you would write to the school board if they wanted to come up with an affirmative action program for South Brunswick High School. So before we get into the definition of what affirmative action is, I'd like to start talking about this idea that when you think of equality, it isn't really so simple. In fact, you might divide it out into two different types of equality. And equality here, we have been talking about in the civil rights movement. We are trying to come up with something that gets rid of segregation. But here we're going to look at a broad host of things that try and solve for historic problems that Black people have faced and also other historically oppressed minorities that really fall along the lines of ethnicity, religion, and sexual orientation, and of course, gender expression. So equality of opportunity and equality of results. So equality of opportunity is the idea that everyone gets treated exactly the same, no matter what their race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, gender expression is. Equality of results is different. What equality of results means is that every person should have the same exact outcome. And that we should do things to help assist people who cannot do well without certain modifications. So what practically speaking, we do this and we don't really bat an eye when it comes to education. And let me explain what I mean by that. We in education, when it comes to students with learning disabilities, always go for equity, not equality. So equity is equality of results. So how do we do that? Well, if there are certain kids that have a hard time reading because they are dyslexic, or there are certain kids who have other health impairments that maybe they need to have different access to physical education because they're in a wheelchair, and so on. We don't treat those that are in wheelchairs and those that are not in wheelchairs the same when it comes to phys ed, and we would not think that to be equitable. We wouldn't give them the same exact opportunity. Say, oh, here's a basketball, go play basketball, but one's in a wheelchair and one's not. I mean, that doesn't seem fair. But it's not equal. It's equitable. It's a quality of results. They both are going to be able to play basketball, but they're not going to play basketball in the same exact way. If you are dyslexic, there's going to be modifications that are made to your assignment. So the person who's not dyslexic doesn't get those modifications. Well, that's not equality of opportunity. That's not equal, exactly the same. But no one thinks that's not fair. So another way of thinking about this is that you've got three different people. If you believe in the idea of equality solely, I mean, quality of opportunity, then everyone got the same opportunity to see the sport game. But for some people, they were shorter than others and saw more of the game than maybe others were able to because of who they were as people. But equity means that, well, for some people, they're not going to need any kind of support. Like the first person right here, he has no box. But this person right here, he needs a box, otherwise he won't be able to see the game. And this person actually needs two boxes. So we're not treating each one of these people equally, exactly the same. We're providing extra support with these boxes. So equality versus equity. What affirmative action programs do is to provide this equity. They're not there to provide equality. What they are there to do is to be fair. We wouldn't say that someone who was in a wheelchair that had a game of basketball that was modified for them, as opposed to the person who was not in a wheelchair, was treated better or privileged. We would say that it was probably just fair and unfair for them to play basketball with everyone else. And the other thing that we've been kind of already grappling with is this idea of segregation. There's two types of segregation. We've already kind of talked about this, but there's one that's called de facto and de jure. So de facto segregation is the kind of segregation that's happening in fact, but it's not because people are pushing you to do something. The great example is, of course, what happens in most lunchrooms across the United States, where people are sitting next to people of a similar race to them, but they weren't told they must do that. De jure segregation is when it's done by law. That would be if the administrators got online, and got in front of everyone and said, everyone must sit in these assigned seats, and then effectively all black people sat with black people, and Asian people sat with Asian people, and white people sat with white people. That would be done by law. So de facto and de jure. What affirmative action programs are attempting to fix, I was going to say ameliorate, but that means to fix, is to try and get rid of the de facto segregation, the segregation that's not there by law, but is there by fact. What do you do in particular when you have schools that are segregated because certain towns have more black people and certain towns have more white people in them? What do we do to make that happen? What do we do about the fact that there may not be as many black applicants that are applying for law school? And how do we correct for something like that? That's not de jure segregation. We have gotten rid of that by law. You can't do that legally. But we can, in theory, have schools that have more black people that are going, fewer black people that are going to them at the law school. And what can we do to correct that? Well, affirmative action programs were designed to fix de facto segregation. It's very controversial. Not everyone agrees with the way in which it does it, but that's the idea behind it. It's trying to provide for equity, to give support. Affirmative action programs make it so that it's easier for black applicants to colleges, universities to get into school because race becomes a factor, not the sole factor, but becomes a factor in having people go to that particular school. I'm going to stop the video here, and then next I want you to watch this affirmative action video.